The police car doors shut with a heavy thud, and the air seemed to shift. Karen watched, her heart still pounding, expecting things to escalate any second. She imagined the officers would realize their mistake, that they'd see this man wasn't supposed to be there, but instead, they looked almost relaxed. One officer even took off his sunglasses and nodded, like he was talking to an old friend. Her stomach twisted. That wasn't right. She felt her throat tighten as her mind raced through possibilities. Maybe they were being tricked. Maybe this man had convinced them he belonged there. People could fake IDs, she'd seen enough news stories to know that. What if he was part of some bigger scheme? What if he was pretending to be the owner to get inside? Karen's hand hovered near her phone again. Should she call 911 back? No, the police were already here. They had to figure it out eventually. But why weren't they questioning him harder? She squinted, trying to read the expressions on their faces from across the street. The sheriff wasn't arguing or acting nervous. He looked calm, too calm. He even leaned against the porch railing, like he had nothing to hide. The lead officer spoke to him again, gesturing toward the door. The sheriff nodded and said something back, his voice low and even. Karen felt a flicker of frustration. What were they saying? Why couldn't she hear? It felt like she was missing something important, like the answers were right in front of her but just out of reach. One of the other officers walked up the driveway, looking around, maybe checking the property. For a second, Karen thought, finally, they're investigating. But the officer didn't seem concerned. He glanced at the house, then back at the sheriff, giving a thumbs up. Karen's mind spun. A thumbs up? That didn't make sense. None of this made sense. Then, to her shock, the sheriff laughed. Not a nervous laugh. A genuine, relaxed chuckle. He shook his head, said something else, and the officers laughed, too. Her stomach twisted tighter. This wasn't how break-ins worked. This wasn't how the police were supposed to handle things. They were supposed to protect the neighborhood, protect her and the other families living nearby. Why were they acting like this man belonged there? The sheriff stepped off the porch, walking toward the officers like he was giving them a tour of the property. He pointed to the side yard, then to the backyard. The officers followed him casually, like they weren't even worried. Karen felt her chest tighten. They weren't treating him like a suspect at all. They were treating him like a friend. Her mind couldn't keep up with what she was seeing. Had she misunderstood something? No, she knew what she saw. He was changing the lock. He looked suspicious. She did the right thing calling the police. Didn't she? Her pulse throbbed in her ears as she watched the group disappear around the corner of the house. Seconds passed. Then minutes. She couldn't look away, even as her legs started to ache from standing so still. A new kind of fear crept in. A fear she hadn't expected. What if she was wrong? What if this wasn't a break-in? Her cheeks felt hot. But that didn't make sense. Why would he change his own lock in the middle of the day, dressed like that, without a locksmith? No, she told herself. Something was still off. Suddenly, the group reappeared. The sheriff led the way, his hands in his pockets like he didn't have a care in the world. The officers walked behind him, chatting casually. One patted him on the shoulder. Karen's heart sank. That wasn't how they treated criminals. The lead officer spoke into his radio, and Karen could only catch bits and pieces from her window. Something about all clear and no further assistance needed. Her stomach dropped. They were leaving. She watched, frozen, as the officers got back into their cars, engines rumbling to life. The sheriff stood on the sidewalk, watching them go. One officer waved to him before pulling away, tires crunching on the pavement. Karen's throat felt dry. This wasn't over. Couldn't be. The man stayed there, hands still in his pockets, watching the street. For a moment, she swore he glanced right at her window. Her breath hitched, and she stumbled back, heart racing. Did he see her? Did he know she was the one who called? Her mind flooded with panicked thoughts. What if he was dangerous? What if he was angry? Her knees felt weak, but she forced herself to peek through the curtain again. He wasn't looking at her anymore. He was back on his porch, picking up his tools. He didn't look upset. He didn't even seem bothered. Karen's heart didn't slow down. It only raced faster. The police were gone. But something still didn't feel right. And deep down, she knew this wasn't over. Karen couldn't pull herself away from the window. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what just happened. The police were gone, the man was still there, and nothing about the situation felt resolved. She watched as he gathered his tools, moving without any urgency. He wasn't looking over his shoulder or rushing like someone who just got away with something. He looked comfortable, like he belonged there. Her throat tightened again. That didn't make sense. He couldn't belong there. He was changing the locks. For heaven's sake, people don't just change locks on houses that aren't theirs. But they also don't look that calm after the police show up. It was like he wasn't afraid of getting caught because he knew he wouldn't be. Her thoughts were interrupted when the sheriff, or whoever he really was, reached into his pocket again. Karen leaned in closer to the window, barely breathing. He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, then lifted it to his ear. He talked for a moment, his face serious. Who was he calling? Was he calling for backup? Another person to help him finish whatever he was doing? Her mind jumped to the worst possible scenarios. What if he was part of a bigger operation? A group casing houses in the area? What if the police were in on it? That thought made her stomach twist. No, that couldn't be true. Could it? The man ended the call and walked toward his car, parked in the driveway. Karen stared, barely blinking. He wasn't leaving. He popped the trunk, grabbed something, and walked back to the house. She squinted. It looked like a box? No, a small safe. Why would he need a safe? Her mind ran wild again. Was he clearing out valuables? Was he preparing to lock something inside before someone else came? Karen's thoughts were spinning faster than she could keep up. She felt her legs tremble beneath her, but she couldn't move. The man disappeared inside the house. Her heart pounded in her ears. He was inside now, that wasn't good. She couldn't see him anymore. Minutes passed. She chewed her lip anxiously, her eyes flicking from the house to the street and back again. Should she call the police again? What would she even say? They had already come and left, convinced everything was fine. If she called again, would they even take her seriously? Her fingers hovered over her phone. She was about to dial when the front door swung open again. The man stepped out carrying the box. His face was calm, maybe even a little satisfied. He locked the door behind him, the new lock, and walked to his car. He put the box in the trunk, slammed it shut, and got in. Karen's heart raced. This was it. He was leaving. He was getting away with whatever he'd done. She watched, holding her breath, as his car slowly backed out of the driveway. But he didn't leave. Her stomach twisted as the car didn't head toward the exit of the neighborhood. Instead, it pulled over and parked a few houses down. He wasn't leaving. He was staying, watching, waiting for something. Karen's hands shook. What was he planning? She couldn't take it anymore. She needed answers. She needed to know what was happening, even if she had to find out herself. Without thinking, she grabbed her keys and headed for the door. Her pulse pounded in her ears, but she didn't stop. She walked outside, her eyes darting to where his car was parked. He was still there. The engine wasn't running anymore. He was just sitting inside, watching. She tried to act casual, like she wasn't watching him back. Her steps felt heavy as she walked toward her mailbox, pretending that was her only goal. She opened it, even though she knew nothing was inside. Her eyes flicked toward his car again, just for a second. He was looking right at her. Her breath caught in her throat. His eyes met hers, steady and unreadable. For a second, neither of them moved. The world felt too quiet. Then he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It wasn't threatening either. It was worse than that, it was knowing. Like he was in on a secret she didn't understand yet. Like he knew exactly what she had done, exactly what she was thinking, and exactly how this was all going to end. Karen's stomach churned. She slammed the mailbox shut and hurried back inside, locking the door behind her. Her heart was racing so hard it hurt. She peeked out the window again, her hands shaking. He was still there, and he was still smiling. Karen couldn't stop trembling. She paced around her living room, her mind spinning with questions that had no answers. The image of his unsettling smile wouldn't leave her head. It wasn't a friendly smile. It wasn't even a mocking one. It was something worse, like he knew something she didn't. Something she wasn't ready to find out. She peeked through the curtain again. His car was still parked a few houses down, unmoving. He wasn't leaving. He wasn't doing anything. He was just sitting there, watching, waiting. Her throat felt dry. What was he waiting for? Why wasn't he leaving? Her mind conjured up a dozen awful possibilities, each one worse than the last. Was he planning to come back when it got dark? Was he waiting for her to leave? Was he waiting for someone else? Her pulse throbbed in her ears, and she felt lightheaded. She wanted to call the police again, but a sick feeling churned in her stomach. They wouldn't believe her, not after the first call. They'd already come and left, convinced everything was fine. What could she say now? He's still sitting there, smiling at me? That wasn't a crime. It wasn't enough. Her heart pounded. She couldn't just sit here. She had to do something. The minutes dragged by like hours. Every time she checked, the car was still there. Her thoughts spiraled. What if he was waiting for nightfall? What if he planned to come back when she was asleep? The idea of waking up to find him inside her house made her stomach twist so hard she felt like she might be sick. Suddenly, her phone buzzed in her hand, startling her so badly she nearly dropped it. She looked down, her heart racing. An unknown number. Her breath caught in her throat. She stared at the screen, her thumb hovering over the button. She didn't want to answer. Every instinct screamed not to. But her curiosity, her need to understand what was happening, overpowered her fear. She swallowed hard and answered. For a second, there was nothing but silence. Then, a low, steady voice came through the line. "Why did you call them?" Her blood ran cold. It was him. She didn't need to ask. She knew that voice. The calm, steady voice she'd heard from her window when he talked to the officers. The voice that sounded too relaxed, too sure of itself. Her throat tightened so hard she could barely breathe. "Who is this?" she managed, though her voice came out in a shaky whisper. "You know who this is," the voice said, quiet and even. "You watched me all day. You called the cops on me. Why?" Karen felt her chest constrict. Her voice trembled. I thought you were breaking in." The man on the phone didn't laugh. He didn't sound angry. If anything, he sounded disappointed, like he expected her to say something else. "You thought I didn't belong here," he said slowly. It wasn't a question. Karen's heart thudded painfully against her ribs. She didn't know what to say. "I changed the locks because it's my house," he said, his voice still maddeningly calm. "I'm the sheriff. You never bothered to find out who your neighbors are, did you?" Her breath caught. Her mind scrambled to keep up. Sheriff. He was the sheriff. She felt like the floor had been ripped out from under her. The officers didn't arrest him because he was one of them. He wasn't pretending to belong there. He did belong there. Her stomach twisted with shame and fear, both fighting for control. The voice on the phone went quiet for a moment, and then it dropped even lower, quieter than before. "You think you know people," he said. "But you don't. You watch from your window and assume things. You think you're protecting this neighborhood." He paused, and Karen swore she could hear the faintest hint of a bitter laugh. "But you never even noticed who lives right across the street from you." Her throat felt dry, but she couldn't find words. "You called 911 on me," he continued, his voice still quiet but carrying an undeniable weight. "You made a mistake, and mistakes have consequences." Karen's heart nearly stopped. Her breath came out in a shaky gasp. I didn't mean to." The line went dead. Her hand shook as she stared at her phone. Her chest felt tight, panic pressing down on her like a weight. She glanced out the window again, expecting to see his car still there. It was gone. The street was empty, quiet, too quiet. Karen's skin prickled with unease. She didn't hear his car leave. She didn't see him go. It was like he vanished into thin air. Her mind spun in circles. Was he gone? Was he coming back? Her heart wouldn't stop racing. A knock at the door made her jump so violently she almost screamed. Her body froze. Her eyes shot to the front door, dread crawling down her spine like ice. 3 more knocks. Slow. Steady. She couldn't move. Her legs felt like they didn't belong to her anymore. Her throat was too tight to scream. The doorbell rang, its cheerful chime feeling disturbingly out of place. Her phone buzzed again in her hand. Another unknown number. Her chest heaved with short, panicked breaths. She didn't answer this time. She couldn't. The knocking stopped. The street outside was still silent. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the neighborhood. The light that once felt warm and comforting now felt eerie, like it was hiding things. Karen didn't know how long she stood there, frozen. She didn't know when the fear turned into exhaustion or when the trembling in her hands finally stopped. But when she finally found the courage to peek outside again, the street was still and quiet. Too quiet, and she had a sinking feeling this wasn't over yet. It was a quiet afternoon in a peaceful suburban neighborhood. The sun hung lazily in the sky, casting warm beams of light over rows of neatly trimmed lawns and clean, cozy homes. The street was calm, with only the occasional car humming by in the distance. Birds chirped in the trees, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. It seemed like just another ordinary day. But for one woman watching from her window, something didn't look right. Her eyes squinted, focusing intently on the man standing on the porch across the street. He wasn't someone unfamiliar. She had seen him before, though she never took the time to know him. He was the black man who lived there, usually seen in uniform, leaving early in the mornings and coming back late. She wasn't sure what he did for a living, but he looked important. Today, though, he wasn't in uniform. He was dressed in casual clothes, jeans and a dark shirt, with a tool belt slung around his waist. He was fiddling with the front door lock, his hands moving steadily as he worked. Her brows knitted together. Something felt off. Why would he be messing with the lock? People didn't change their locks in the middle of the day unless something was wrong. Maybe he wasn't supposed to be there. Maybe he wasn't the homeowner after all. Her mind raced. He could be a handyman, but wouldn't someone else be home to supervise? The more she thought about it, the more uneasy she felt. Her name was Karen, and she had always been the type to keep an eye on things. She wasn't one to sit back when something seemed suspicious. It was her neighborhood, too, and she wasn't about to let anyone get away with something shady on her watch. She remembered the neighborhood watch meetings, the warnings about keeping the community safe. This felt like one of those moments. She watched him closely, her heart rate picking up. He didn't seem to be in a hurry, but that only made it look more suspicious to her. He wasn't trying to sneak around, but maybe that was part of his plan, to look casual and blend in. Her mind began piecing together stories, imagining all the things that could be happening. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for her phone. Her gut told her something wasn't right. She dialed 911. The operator's calm voice answered, asking what the emergency was. Karen spoke quickly, her voice hushed but urgent. She described what she saw. A man, black, trying to break into the house across the street. She mentioned that she didn't think he lived there, that he looked like he was forcing the lock open. She made sure to emphasize that she was scared for the neighborhood's safety. The operator assured her that officers were on their way. Karen felt a surge of relief. She wasn't overreacting. She was doing the right thing. Keeping her eyes locked on the man, she stayed by the window. He didn't notice her watching. He just kept working on the lock, calm and focused. Minutes passed, though they felt longer. The sound of sirens broke the quiet, growing louder as they approached. Karen's heart pounded faster, a strange mix of excitement and validation coursing through her. The police would handle it. They would figure out who he was and what he was doing there. The sheriff looked up when he heard the sirens. His brows lifted in surprise, but he didn't panic. He set his tools down slowly, standing straight as the police cars pulled up. Officers stepped out cautiously, hands near their belts. Karen leaned closer to the window, her pulse racing. This was it, they caught him red-handed. She watched as one officer approached him, speaking in a firm voice. The man didn't argue. He reached into his back pocket slowly, pulling something out. Her eyes widened. Was it a weapon? No, it was a wallet. He opened it and handed something to the officer. The sheriff spoke calmly, his voice low and steady. The officer studied whatever was in his hand, then glanced back at him, his expression shifting. Karen's heart thudded harder. Something wasn't going the way she expected. The officer wasn't cuffing him. He wasn't shouting or making him get on the ground. Instead, the officer nodded and handed the wallet back. She couldn't hear what was being said, but she saw the officer gesture to the other cops. Slowly, they relaxed, lowering their hands. The sheriff said something else, and one of the officers laughed. Actually laughed, like they were sharing a joke. Karen stared in disbelief. What was going on? Why weren't they arresting him? Was there a mistake? Her throat tightened as confusion swirled in her mind. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. She felt the weight of her phone still in her hand, fingers gripping it tightly. The man wasn't being dragged away in cuffs like she had imagined. Something wasn't right. But now it wasn't him she was suspicious of. It was the situation itself.